We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
As American voters are heard, the CBS News political team brings understanding of what America decides. Streaming tomorrow night at 9 on the CBS News app.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Killian coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. Here's a look at some of the stories we're watching right now. Lawyers for former President Donald Trump have filed a lawsuit this afternoon seeking a special master to review evidence in the search of the Mar-a-Lago estate. Robert Costa joins us from West Palm Beach with the very latest on the developments. Voters in Florida will pick Democratic challengers to Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Marco Rubio in tomorrow's primary elections, where things stand in the Sunshine State. Meanwhile, New York's historic primary election will force at least one longtime Democratic House member out of Congress, while voters in the Empire State have to return to the polls for a second time this year. Plus, a look at the issues at stake. And later this hour, a federal appeals court agrees to delay Senator Lindsey Graham's testimony in Georgia's 2020 election investigation, why a grand jury wants to hear from the South Carolina Republican. Plus, after advising 7 U.S. presidents and spending decades as the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci announces he's leaving government service, when he's set to step down, and what he plans on doing next. But we begin tonight with the news just happening late today. Former President Trump's lawyers have filed a court motion asking for an independent arbitrator called a special master in the Mar-a-Lago search. If appointed, a special master would review evidence in the case. In a statement announcing the motion, the former president called the search an unnecessary, unwarranted, and un-American break-in. For more on this, Robert Costa joins us now. He is CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent. Bob, former President Trump's lawyers have just filed a motion requesting the appointment of a special master. You broke this story a few days ago. Why are they requesting this?
This is weeks after the FBI searched former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate just across the water behind me. They went in there in early August looking for classified material that they believed former President Trump took with him in the final days of his administration from the Trump White House to his estate in Florida without going through the National Archives. And after they heard about that, they began to investigate whether former President Trump properly handled those documents, the classified material in some of those boxes, and it began this federal investigation. After the FBI search, there has been an outcry among Trump's supporters and from Trump himself, as well as his lawyers. But until now, we haven't had a clear picture about how exactly they would respond beyond anger. And today's filing is the first step they've taken in a few days, at least, to show their next legal plan on this front, which is to contest the search in some way by requesting a so-called special master. In other words, a neutral party to come in and work with the Justice Department, work with the Trump lawyers to have what they believe would be an independent arbiter to look over this material, this evidence, and possibly return it. It's going to be complicated, though, because you have a federal judge in Florida who's right now evaluating how to handle whether to release the affidavit that led to the warrant, whether to redact all or some of that affidavit. And that deadline is Thursday for the government to submit its material on that front. And so now added to this discussion is the Trump decision today to file this motion asking for a neutral party to review it all. It leads us into uncharted waters later this week about where this probe is going between the Trump lawyers and the Justice Department.
And so in terms of the judge that you just mentioned who did formally reject the government's request to keep the search affidavit fully sealed, I mean, based on that, does this mean potentially we could see some portions of this affidavit come later this week?
It's certainly possible, but Judge Bruce Reinhart here in West Palm Beach, Florida, he said in a 13-page order earlier today, which is essentially a statement of his opinion, his assessment of his view on how this is all going. He said today that he's going to listen to the government as it makes its case for redactions, and he might well side with the government in its belief that much of this affidavit, this underlying evidence, should not be made public. But he did note that he has not made a final decision on how to handle the affidavit because he stated he believes that there is a historic interest, intense public interest in having a lot of this underlying evidence be made public so people would understand why the former president's home here in Florida was searched by FBI agents. He said it's unusual circumstances that demands more answers from the government. But the government is saying repeatedly that because of sources, methods, dealing with witnesses, they don't want to say too much. And so at this point, it looks like it's going to be a battle between those who want to redact everything or most of everything and those who want it all in terms of the information about this case to be made public. We'll see where the judge ends up leaning. We won't know until about Thursday this week in that noon deadline here at the West Palm Beach courthouse.
As you alluded to earlier, this is complicated. So what is the political impact of all of this?
Complicated as well. It's hard to predict the political fallout, especially for a former president who is facing legal scrutiny, not only here in Florida, but just north in Georgia, the Fulton County grand jury investigation into Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, the New York State Attorney General, the Manhattan District Attorney, the January 6th Committee on Capitol Hill, the Alan Weisselberg, his former CFO at the Trump Organization, now working with prosecutors in a case revolving the Trump Organization. So you see on all these different fronts, the former president dealing with legal challenges, but politically polls show him in a strong position with Republican voters. But that doesn't mean he has the 2024 nomination sewn up should he decide to run. At this point, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis remains very popular with core Republican voters. And there are some new names out there, like Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, some names we've heard before, like Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who are all keeping an eye on the 2024 presidential race should Trump decide not to run, or should Trump run and somehow be hobbled politically or legally.
And as you know, there are still a lot of questions about what's in those classified documents and how they got down to Mar-a-Lago in the first place. What have you learned in your reporting about the former president's record keeping?
We've learned a lot in recent days about how this happened. How did classified documents get down to Mar-a-Lago behind me? Well, it's because the former president decided to bring them down. And the process is set up with protocol for when presidents, when they leave the White House in January after being defeated or retiring, that they have to work with the National Archives to hand over official presidential records, let the National Archives sift through them, and then they're given to the retired president, the former president, to deal with their own presidential records and presidential libraries. The former president, Donald Trump, did not go through that process with about 24 boxes that he had housed in his residence at the White House in the final days. And because he did not go through the National Archives process, federal prosecutors say some classified material from intelligence briefings ended up in those boxes that then got brought down to Mar-a-Lago and were stored in storage areas. And part of what prompted the search, we have learned today at CBS News, is that there's video surveillance that was acquired by the government after it issued a subpoena to the Trump legal team for that surveillance. And they see in the surveillance footage some people in and around and about, going into and out of the storage area inside Mar-a-Lago. Now, sources close to the Trump legal team say, don't read anything into that. It's just people who work for Trump being in the storage area. But this did concern, based on our reporting, federal investigators who worried that there might be too much access to this storage facility inside Mar-a-Lago.
Robert Costa with multiple developments for us tonight. Thanks so much from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Thank you.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said the fight for control of the Senate will be close during remarks earlier today in Kentucky. It appears to be a shift from his comments last week that the House is more likely to flip than the Senate.
Flipping the Senate? What are the chances? It's a 50-50 proposition. We got a 50-50 Senate right now. We got a 50-50 nation. And I think the outcome is likely to be very, very close either way.
The GOP senator went on to say that if Republicans take control of the House and the Senate in November, it will force President Biden to become more moderate. Florida is holding its primary elections tomorrow, and the results could set up several fierce battles come November. Sitting Congresswoman Val Demings is now running for Senate and faces 3 challengers for the Democratic nomination: Ricardo de la Fuente, Brian Rush, and William Sanchez. She has surpassed all of them in fundraising, and if victorious, she's poised to face incumbent Republican Senator Marco Rubio in the general election. For more on Florida's primaries, CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now. Caitlin, recent polls in Florida have shown the potential Senate matchup between Demings and Rubio tightening. What's behind the shift?
Hey, Nicole. Well, this could shape up to be a marquee race. And what's interesting to look at is Val Demings. She is expected to win this Democratic primary tomorrow night. And there are things that can help her and hurt her in this race against Rubio. On one hand, she's the former police chief of Orlando. So that gives her kind of a calling card, because Democrats are really going to be taking attacks on the crime front. And so that can be something that she might be able to use to kind of neutralize on that issue. On the other hand, as you know, she as a House member, led the impeachment against Donald Trump, was on that impeachment team. And Donald Trump is still very popular in Florida. He won the state twice. Democrats think that this is an uphill climb to beat Marco Rubio in this seat, given the dynamics at play. But she is someone who could fundraise, could attract a lot of money and attention. And the polls show tightening, but there are a lot of vulnerabilities that Democrats have in Florida.
A lot of eyes are also on the race for governor, and we know incumbent Ron DeSantis is running for re-election. How are things shaping up on the Democratic side in terms of who might ultimately challenge him?
Yeah, well, the big race on the Democratic side is between the former governor, Charlie Crist, who used to be a Republican, then switched to be a Democrat and is now a member of Congress, and Nikki Fried, who is the agricultural commissioner. That is a primary shaping up between the two of them. And Crist has been talking about his credentials and experience in the post. Nikki Fried is going after him for, switching parties, not being as true a Democrat as she is. They both think that the issue of abortion is something that has galvanized Democratic voters and could potentially help them. But the reason that this race is so critical for Democrats is they really want to blunt any momentum that Ron DeSantis has. He won the governorship by just a half percentage point in 2018 and now has become kind of a star of the Republican Party with larger ambitions for the presidency. And so if he wins re-election, that could be a boon to those efforts. And Democrats want to do what they can to blunt him, because he has really been at the center of a lot of key issues.
And because of that, he also has been gaining in terms of a national profile and campaigning for other candidates in other states as rumors, of course, build over a potential presidential run. Could this impact his own run in the Sunshine State for re-election?
Well, if he is able to win re-election, that will certainly boost his prospects for 2024, because he can say that he ran successfully twice and was re-elected. So that gives him, a credential of sorts. And he's also, been able, or at least trying to kind of place himself as someone who is an acolyte of former President Trump, but without all of the baggage. And so they are very much aligned on policy. DeSantis has been kind of at the forefront of these culture wars waged by Republicans, especially on the issue of education and some others. You remember that he took that fight to Disney with some potential blowback for his own constituents. So we'll see how that plays out politically. But he is someone who has really kind of forged that lane. And so if he is able to win re-election, he will certainly use that as a credential for running again. Florida is a place that Democrats have really been struggling in recent years. It's a place Obama won, but Republicans have been doing very well there. The governor's race in 2018 was a bright spot for Republicans as Democrats had a really successful year elsewhere. So this is an uphill climb for Democrats, but for DeSantis, that's why all of the focus is there, because of these ambitions beyond this midterm.
And how is former President Trump playing into the Florida primaries?
Well, he is still very popular among Republicans there and among voters at large. And so he is an influential figure. What will be really interesting to see is kind of how DeSantis navigates all of that, because on one hand, he needs Trump supporters to win his own reelection. And so the big question mark really is whether Donald Trump declares a 2024 bid before the midterm elections, because that could put DeSantis in somewhat of a tight spot, having to, answer whether he would support former President Trump running for president again, given that he needs that base of support to turn out for him in this midterm, and not to mention beyond that as well. So an interesting dynamic there at play to watch these two who are close, but, you might see some instances of daylight moving forward depending on how things go.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, good to see you as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Redistricting forces two prominent New York Democrats to go head-to-head. How Jerry Nadler and Carolyn Maloney are spending their final hours before they face off for the same seat. We'll preview that race and take a look at other key ones to watch in the Empire State. Plus, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona speaks to CBS News about the nation's teacher shortage, what he thinks could be a possible solution to get more educators into the classroom. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
It's East Side versus West Side as two veteran New York lawmakers face off in a congressional Democratic primary in the state's 12th district Tuesday. New York Congressman Jerry Nadler, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, is up against New York Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, the chair of the House Oversight Committee, because of redistricting. According to a recent poll by Emerson College, Congressman Nadler leads Congresswoman Maloney by 19 points. For more on this, Scott McFarland joins us now. He is my colleague on the Hill, our CBS News congressional correspondent. Scott, thanks so much for being with us. First, just for people who may not be familiar with what's going on in New York, give us the backstory on how we got here with two incumbents going up against each other.
Of all the chaos of this midterm election cycle, the most chaotic situation might be the one in New York, where they redrew the maps, then redrew the maps again, then a court weighed in and redrew the maps again. And these intra-party redistricting primaries can sometimes be the most unorthodox and most divisive, because you have candidates of the same party running against each other, and there are not a number of wedge issues they can pick up upon. In this case, in the New York 12th in Manhattan, it's the longtime veteran, Carolyn Maloney, chair of the House Oversight Committee, against the longtime veteran, chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, and two other Democrats on the ballot as well. These are two members who've been around a long time, amassed a lot of power on behalf of New York City, but don't have any experience running against each other because they never had to. They've been forced together through a redrawn map. We've seen that earlier this cycle in Illinois and in West Virginia, and it makes for unorthodox races where they try to find wedge issues where they can because their voting records are so similar. We know Mr. Nadler has a series of campaign stops for Election Day, including some election night campaigning outside the subway in Manhattan. Ms. Maloney has kept an active campaign schedule. They've gone head-to-head in debates. But there's one thing for certain, Nicole, even though we don't know the results a day in advance, we know New York is losing a veteran legislator either way. It's the pain of redistricting for politicians being experienced in many parts of the country this year.
And as you pointed out, both Nadler and Maloney have long records in Congress. So how are they trying to distinguish themselves going into Tuesday's primary?
Both arguing that they best represent this new constituency, this newly composed district, which may seem unorthodox for New Yorkers, but it includes the Upper West Side and the Upper East Side into the same congressional district. Both protested this when they were redrawn together, saying those two divisions of New York City should remain apart, should remain separately represented. They are now together, both arguing that the constituency they bring with them to the new district is best served by each. Ms. Maloney has caught some headlines during debates and during some of her campaigning by saying it's her understanding Joe Biden is not running for re-election in 2024. She has walked that statement back. That's not the headline that's going to help her necessarily in a Democratic primary. You showed the polls. Mr. Nadler is believed to be the front runner.
Let's also talk about the dynamics in New York's 10th congressional district. More than a dozen candidates are vying for the nomination there. Why has that race gotten so heated?
You've reported very well on this. Mondaire Jones, who's the incumbent member of the House who has moved to the New York 10th because of this redistricting, is a bit out of his old district now. He's moved south and he's moved away from a lot of the constituents who elected him to office. He needs to find a new constituency in this primary in the 10th, and there's any number of other candidates to subdivide what's going to be a small turnout vote already. The front runner, according to the most recent pollings, if you want to use the phrase front runner in a 6-person race, is Dan Goldman, who served as an impeachment attorney for the U.S. House during the first impeachment of Donald Trump, and has made among his frontline issues the protection of democracy, which is a contrast to the kitchen table issues of gas and groceries so many candidates have put at the forefront during their elections this year, during their campaigns this year. We'll see what happens in the 10th, but it's another one of those races that is different than the others because it's a newly redrawn district with no incumbent in it.
There is also a special election in the Hudson Valley. What's significant about that race?
This is the New York 19th. It's a special election that falls on primary election day, but it's also being viewed as one of those canary in the coal mine races, kind of like Kansas was when it put the abortion issue on the ballot earlier this year. You have a Democratic candidate named Patrick Ryan from Ulster County. He's the executive in the Mid-Hudson Valley in Ulster County, New York, against the Republican Mark Molinaro, who's the county executive of Dutchess County. They're going head to head, but you watch the campaign ads and you see Patrick Ryan trying to make abortion rights a prominent issue. Take a look at a clip of his most recent ad.
Fought for our families, for our freedom.
And freedom includes a woman's right to choose.
How can we be a free country if the government tries to control women's bodies?
That's not the country I fought to defend.
His opponent, Mark Molinaro, running his own ads, of course, and making the kitchen table argument in his most recent spot. Take a look at this one.
Like paying more for gas and groceries? Of course not. Then why vote for Pat Ryan and Democrats? Democrats will continue spending your money.
A lot of money, a lot of outside interest now flooding into this race. It's believed to be a test case ahead of November with an actual congressional Democrat candidate and an actual congressional Republican candidate going against each other in August with the issue of abortion rights at the forefront.
All right, Scott McFarland, a lot to follow tomorrow. Thanks so much. U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona says federal COVID-19 funds should be used to address a growing teacher shortage. Speaking on Face the Nation Sunday, Cardona called on schools and universities to offer additional support to young and retired educators. Here's part of what he said.
Our students need additional support. They need smaller class sizes. They need tutors. They need after-school programs. So let's use the American Rescue Plan dollars to bring back retired teachers, to work with universities to make sure that our student teachers are starting a little bit earlier into their profession, using the dollars that were put forward by the federal government. We think it's important that our students get more this year, not less.
Education officials estimate that U.S. students are on average 2 to 4 months behind in key subjects due to shifts in hybrid learning during the pandemic. As schools face a severe lack of teachers and resources, districts in some states have shortened the school week from 5 days to 4. At least 140 asylum seekers arrived in New York City on buses Sunday after being sent there from Texas. New York City's Mayor Eric Adams claims it's the biggest single-day arrival of migrants from the Lone Star State. Volunteers provided them with food, clothing, and bilingual lawyers. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been sending migrants to New York City and Washington, D.C. to protest the Biden administration's immigration policies. The judge's decision surrounding the affidavit involving the search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home still leaves lots of lingering questions. What we learned today and what we are hearing about threats to law enforcement in relation to this case. You're streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
I identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Nicole Kelly, and here's a look at some of our top stories. Pfizer is seeking FDA authorization for an updated COVID-19 booster that specifically targets Omicron and its subvariant. Moderna is expected to file a similar request soon. The U.S. government has already purchased more than 160 million doses of the new bivalent boosters to be distributed pending FDA approval. Plus, more than 4,000 Ohio teachers have voted to go on strike after failing to reach a deal with the school district on an updated contract. District officials say classes will begin as scheduled Wednesday with remote learning and substitute teachers. The Columbus Board of Education will hold an emergency meeting Monday to address the strike. And the FBI is investigating a man who may have left 2 suspicious packages at a West Virginia federal building. The probe comes as lawmakers call on social media companies to address a growing number of threats against the federal government. Skylar Henry has more from Washington.
The leaders of 2 House panels sent these letters to 8 social media companies, demanding they address threats on their platforms against federal law enforcement officials. There's been a surge in calls for violence following the FBI's search.
I'd say in terms of volume, it absolutely is similar to what we saw in the lead up to January 6th.
Alex Friedfeld tracks extremism with the Anti-Defamation League.
So what are you noticing in terms of trends, whether they hashtag or just conversations, and does that rise to a level of concern for you and your team?
We are seeing widespread calls for civil war. There is this sense on the right that the time for politics is over and it is now the time for bullets.
Last week, authorities arrested 46-year-old Adam B., saying the Pennsylvania man threatened to kill FBI agents. The week before, Ricky Schiffer was killed after attempting to breach the FBI office in Cincinnati. Federal officials say the Ohio man posted a call to arms on former President Trump's social media site, Truth Social, and urged people to be ready for combat. Prior to breaching the FBI office, Schiffer wrote, "If you don't hear from me, it's true. I tried attacking the FBI." Last week, Trump posted about a great simmering anger, but other Republicans are distancing themselves from the tension.
It's completely wrong, right? It's completely wrong, but that's not where 99% of Republicans are at, of course.
House panel leaders have requested a response from the social media companies by September 2nd regarding the number of threats on their platforms and if they're reporting them to law enforcement. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Washington.
For more on this, Nicole Skanga joins us now. She is CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us. As we've been reporting, former President Trump's lawyers have filed for a special master in the case. How is the Justice Department responding?
Nicole, good to be with you. And the Department of Justice just putting out its statement from spokesman Anthony Coley. I want to read it here for our viewers because it is only 3 lines. It says the August 8th search warrant at Mar-a-Lago was authorized by a federal court. Upon the required finding of probable cause, the department is aware of this evening's motion. The United States will file its response in court. Now, we are still awaiting guidance regarding a timeline on when we should anticipate that response from the U.S. government. But this comes already at a very busy week for lawyers, counsel representing the United States here who have already been working on their brief, their version of the redacted affidavit, probable cause affidavit that is due in court on Thursday. Now also responding to this motion from former President Trump's legal team saying you can expect a response on that one, too.
And what have we learned thus far from the former president's legal team, that is, about what was going on in the days heading up to the search?
Yeah, so in addition to the motion itself, there were some details that were alleged by the former president's legal team regarding what took place prior to the FBI's authorized search of Mar-a-Lago. In particular, Mr. Trump's legal team alleging that on June 8th, 2022, Mr. Bratt, who is, of course, counsel for the U.S. government, requested that the storage room that was being used to house these documents be secured. The legal team here saying that Mr. Trump, in response, directed his team to place a second lock on the door to the storage room, and one was added, and that members of his personal and household staff were made available for voluntary interviews with the FBI. That is the first time we're learning that information, Nicole. Also on June 22nd, 2022, we're learning, according to Mr. Trump's legal team, the government subpoenaed the custodian of records for the Trump Organization to seek that surveillance video of Mar-a-Lago, and the legal team here saying that they also provided that video surveillance to the FBI in June.
And as you alluded to, we'll also get a possible decision or ruling later this week with respect to that affidavit regarding the search warrant of the Mar-a-Lago property. And so in terms of the judge in that case, he issued another memo today. What did that say in terms of whether or not he may green light release or some redactions with respect to this affidavit?
Well, we certainly anticipate that Judge Reinhardt in this case will greenlight certain redactions. He's made clear in the courtroom last week that he, while not comfortable releasing a full affidavit, is also not comfortable straight up saying no. And so, it remains to be seen what counsel for the government will come back to him with on Thursday. But one thing that was made clear in the judge's memo put out today is that he is aware that there have been increased threats to FBI personnel and government officials since the search. And he noted, quote, given the public notoriety and controversy about this search, it's likely that even witnesses who are not expressly named in the affidavit would be quickly and broadly identified over social media and other communication channels, which could lead them to being harassed and intimidated. So the judge recognizing here that there is a threat to the personal security of law enforcement, federal prosecutors, and witnesses connected to this ongoing investigation of the former president. And of course, we know that the judge here, Bruce Reinhart, is intimately familiar with some of those sensitivities. He himself has been doxed. Personal information about his family and his address have been revealed online in the days after the search warrant was first unsealed. And so the judge, expressing here that he is not only okay with some of those redactions of names being made, but also descriptions that could be used to track down some of the individuals connected to this ongoing investigation. Ultimately, that means that what we see, be it Thursday or in the weeks to come of the affidavit, might include significant redactions, particularly when it comes to any identifying information, descriptors that could be traced back to those individuals who are cooperating or actively working on this probe.
And then very briefly, in about 30 seconds or so, what can you tell us about the current threat environment toward law enforcement?
Yeah, so currently law enforcement on high alert. Of course, the FBI has seen an uptick in the number of threats, even in the judge's memo today. Reinhart pointing out that in, the aftermath of the FBI's authorized search, we saw a gunman arrive in Cincinnati at an FBI field office. Later deceased, but attempt to have a confrontation with law enforcement there, bringing an AR-15 style rifle. In addition, after certain media blog outlets revealed the identities of two FBI officials allegedly connected to this case, that those individuals, those officers had received similar death threats that surfaced online. And so we know that this is a heightened threat environment.
All right, Nicole Skanka, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Former President Barack Obama is set to headline a fundraiser focused on the upcoming midterms. Two sources familiar with the plans confirmed to CBS News the event will be held on Martha's Vineyard next Tuesday for the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. The group is run by former Attorney General Eric Holder, who is also expected to attend. It will feature a discussion on democracy, and monies raised will go towards the organization's legal actions, work on voting rights, and support for various candidates. A federal judge in Georgia is halting Senator Lindsey Graham's testimony in a grand jury looking into the 2020 election for now. What's at the heart of the Republicans' appeal against taking the stand, and why the grand jury wants to hear from him. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
when weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
A federal appeals court has temporarily blocked Senator Lindsey Graham from testifying about former President Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. Graham was scheduled to testify before a special grand jury Tuesday. Prosecutors say the senator called Georgia's Secretary of State about re-examining some absentee ballots after the election. His testimony remains on hold while Graham's lawyers make their appeal. Tamar Holloman joins me now. She is a senior reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tamar, thanks for being with us. Explain this order and how long could Senator Graham get a reprieve?
Sure. Well, this order came yesterday morning from 3 judges on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a federal court. They direct a lower court judge to basically examine the sorts of questions that may be on or off limits for prosecutors and members of this special purpose grand jury, should they be able to question Senator Graham. Now, last week, that same U.S. District Court judge ruled that she would not be quashing the senator's subpoena as he requested. And now, as he appeals this ruling, this federal appeals court is looking to kind of ferret out just how much federal protections in the Constitution for members of Congress, how much that shields them from questioning before a grand jury like this.
And so in terms of some of those arguments, how strong are they?
Well, that's for judges to be determined. But in this initial batch of arguing that we saw from the senator and his lawyers, he was arguing that the federal speech or debate clause, which was put into the Constitution basically to preserve the independence of Congress, the legislative branch in the courtroom, they argued that it was a very sweeping protection, that there really was nothing that prosecutors and jurors would be able to ask him about 2 phone calls that he had placed to the Secretary of State's office after the elections. So far, the federal judge who's been overseeing Senator Graham's case, as well as a sister case from Georgia Congressman Jody Hice, she's been very skeptical and rejected that there's an outright ban. Instead, she's been more likely to set in place guardrails, basically saying the types of questions that are protected from the Constitution, that they can't ask the senator or a member of Congress, and things that are allowed. And in her ruling, when she ended up quashing the senator's subpoena last week, she laid out several categories that she thinks are on the table, more political topics that don't necessarily, strike at the senator's motivations, but could look into any potential coordination between the senator and the Trump campaign.
If the court rejects the senator's appeal, what would happen next?
Well, in theory, the senator would have to go before the special grand jury and answer any questions that they may have. Although the senator has indicated that he intends to fight this thing, and he suggested in remarks that he gave in South Carolina recently that he could appeal this all the way up to the Supreme Court. So I have a feeling that this fight will take a while before it's resolved. We're not expecting to hear anything from this federal appeals court until early September anyway. And should there be an appeal, this could be stretched out even farther.
I was going to say, where do you put the chances of appeal going to the high court? Or do you think ultimately the senator could be compelled to testify? And if so, what would the grand jury be looking to learn from Senator Graham?
Sure. There's several lines of inquiry that we know that prosecutors and the grand jury is interested in asking the senator about. He called the Secretary of State's office twice in the aftermath of the election, and they're very curious to hear more about the circumstances surrounding that call, what compelled him to call Brad Raffensperger in the first place, what he was asking for, and kind of the aftermath of that. They're interested in any potential coordination with the Trump campaign, since, of course, at that time, former President Trump was fighting election results in Georgia. And in a latest filing from the DA's office, they indicated that they think Senator Graham's testimony could unlock other potential sources who they'd want to go interview for their inquiry. And they mentioned that time is of the essence, that the sequencing of these the sequencing of these witnesses and when they go before the grand jury is very important to them as they carry out this investigation.
And again, from what you're hearing, what are the chances that you think he will ultimately be compelled to testify?
I mean, so far, what we've seen out of a Fulton County judge here, as well as this U.S. District Court judge, they haven't been willing to quash any subpoenas so far in this investigation. They've always said, even with elected officials on the federal and the state level, asked of them, even if you can't really get at their intentions when it comes to things they might have been doing in their line of work. And so if that history is any guide, he might very well be compelled to testify. But it is different when you're talking about a member of Congress. It is different when you're talking about going up to the Supreme Court. And so I'll be very curious, especially with this conservative majority now, if they have a different view.
Tamar Hollerman with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, which means you have a couple of minutes to download the free CBS News app on all your devices. You can catch live local coverage from across the country from all of our CBS stations. And while you're at it, check out Paramount Plus. We've got a mountain of content for you to stream there as well, including your favorite shows, movies, and sports.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Former NBA player Dennis Rodman says he plans to visit Russia to seek the release of WNBA star Brittany Griner. Rodman has reportedly said he received permission to go to Russia to help the WNBA star. It is unclear who gave him that permission. Rodman met Russian President Vladimir Putin back in 2014, calling him, quote, cool. Griner is currently serving a 9-year sentence on drug charges. The U.S. says it is negotiating with Russia on a possible prisoner swap to free her. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, says he will step down in December to pursue the next chapter of his career. Dr. Fauci has led the agency for 38 years under 7 different presidents. He became the face of the White House COVID-19 response in 2020, despite disagreeing with former President Trump about the severity of the virus. In an interview with Red and Blue in April, Dr. Fauci indicated he intended to step down, but only after the worst of the pandemic had subsided. In a statement Monday, President Biden said because of Dr. Fauci's many contributions to public health, lives here in the U.S. and around the world have been saved. Mr. Biden went on to say the country is stronger, more resilient, and healthier because of him. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail. We're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
As American voters are heard, the CBS News political team brings understanding of what America decides. Streaming tomorrow night at 9 on the CBS.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Piper. Thanks for joining us. Here's a look at the top stories we are following right now. Donald Trump's legal team has made the next move in the fight over the search at Mar-a-Lago. Now they want the government to stop looking at evidence until an outside expert can review it. We'll find out what exactly that means and how it could impact the DOJ